Shavua Tov, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm delighted to welcome all of you here this evening. May I ask that you now turn off your cell phones, or at least put them onto mute? Okay? Thank you very much. On all our behalf, may I offer our sincerest wishes that Ayala Shapiro, the granddaughter of our Gabbai Israel Shapiro, should make a speedy refuah shalema. I have much pleasure tonight in welcoming Dr. Yitzchak Noy back to McDonald's. I want to thank him so much for spending his time with us this evening to give his lecture and afterwards to answer our questions. Dr. Yitzchak Noy was born in 1942 in Moshav Netayim, a cooperative village near the Mediterranean seacoast, south of Tel Aviv. He graduated from the Hebrew University, where he majored in general and Jewish history. He also earned a PhD at Brandeis University, Boston. Dr. Noy taught history at Tel Aviv University, Open University, and Hebrew University. A member of the Israel Broadcasting Authority's staff since 1966, he began his on-air as an announcer and radio actor. He went on to become an anchor, a news correspondent, and presenter of a program that surveyed the daily and weekly press published in Israel and abroad. The focus was on social and international affairs, as well as science and technology. He is also the author of 11 books and a 3-act play. His current program, known as Worldwide Sabbath, is broadcast Saturday mornings and deals with highlights of the local and international press, newspapers, weeklies and monthlies. He will be talking about a meeting that took place in March 1960 at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York. His lecture actually is titled The Waldorf Astoria Meeting, Securing the Future of the Jewish State. Yitzchak, the floor is yours.
תודה רבה, David. Thank you very much. And שבוע טוב, חברות וחברים. When David first called me over the phone, it was, I believe, 2 years ago, when I first visited the new synagogue. He said to me, the new synagogue is situated on McDonald Street, but don't expect any restaurants. Do you happen to know who McDonald was?
Yeah. James Grover.
And I said,
sorry.
That's what you asked me. Remember, David. Now it's my turn to fight back. And I said, yes, I believe I know. You are talking about James McDonald, the first American ambassador to Israel, who previously, during the Evian conference, was a representative of the United States and the State Department dealing with Jewish refugees, those who weren't welcome by the United States and nor by the British mandate to shut the doors of Eretz Israel because they had to take into consideration the fury of the Arabs that were agitated by both Mussolini and Hitler. And David said, that's enough, that's enough. From now on you are a respected and welcomed lecturer in the new synagogue. That was the beginning. Maybe I'm a little bit exaggerating, but remember you said don't take very seriously my sense of humor. When we talked over the phone last time, and since I'm half deaf, And I said yes. I didn't really understand because there was so much noise around in the middle of the street. Anyway, Shavua Tov, Erev Tov, and I'm very happy to be here. And the subject of our lecture, and 10 minutes before my time expires, you signal me, David, because when I start talking, I forget to finish. I can talk for hours. It's a problem. But anyway, the subject we are dealing with is that Nesiah, or journey that David Ben-Gurion made to New York to meet with the Alte. The Alte was Konrad Adenauer. Konrad Adenauer was the first chancellor of West Germany right after the end of World War II in 1945. And he was the German leader who navigated Germany into the economic miracle and so on and so forth. And already in 1960, Germany is the major economic engine of Europe. The same status that Germany enjoys even today. And David Ben-Gurion met him in Waldorf Astoria Hotel. It was the beginning of March 1960. And in the history, the short history of this country, the meeting hasn't left much impression on historians, even though once you start to investigate what happened during that meeting, you realize full well that that was one of the major, most crucial meetings that defined the future of Israel for generations to come. And David Ben-Gurion realized it full well. I'll explain myself. David Ben-Gurion meets Adenauer, and Adenauer suggests advisors, of course, sitting around, Yitzchak Noy, German advisors, and so on and so forth. And Adenauer suggests that the discussion would take place in German. David Ben-Gurion suggests that it would take place in English. David Ben-Gurion has no difficulty dealing or negotiating whatever in German. His German is good. But he has a very good reason, you understand in a few minutes why he insisted on speaking in German, in English. And the main reason why David Ben-Gurion made it all the way to New York was to ask Adenauer for a loan of $500 million. Back then, in 1960, I believe that $500 million would be something in the neighborhood of 6, 7, maybe more billion dollars in today's money. A huge sum of money, no question about it. And the country is poor. Israel is a poor country. And he wants the money for, now we have to understand and follow David Ben-Gurion's termination, or David Ben-Gurion's language, to be more exact. He wants the $500 million as a loan for in Hebrew it is called Pituach HaNegev, namely the development of the Negev, south of Israel, the desert, Israeli desert, Judean desert and other parts are all called Negev. And there is another term that David Ben-Gurion uses, which is the settlement of the Negev, or in Hebrew, Yishuv HaNegev, because David Ben-Gurion used to beg the new generation, the youth, the Israeli youth to settle the Negev, and he used to talk about Liyashev HaNegev every now and then. it was well known among the youngsters of the first Israelis, first generation that fought for the country during the War of Independence. So what does he want when he talks about the development of the Negev? To make it even more mysterious, Adenauer, and you can imagine that Adenauer comes to the meeting well prepared, the German intelligence knows exactly what David Ben-Gurion wants, and when David Ben-Gurion asks him for the loan for the development of the Negev, Adenauer's answer is, tell me, Mr. Ben-Gurion, in your opinion, how many microphones are hidden in the walls here, in the room in Waldorf Astoria? And then David Ben-Gurion's answer is, I don't know how many, but I'm sure there are. One can go mashige. I mean, two people, Adenauer is already 70, David Ben-Gurion is 60, maybe one of them is senile already. He is talking about development of the Negev. He is talking about microphones. But once you know how to follow Ben-Gurion's terminology, and Adenauer knew very well how to do it, you are not surprised. When David Ben-Gurion talked about the development of the Negev, he talked about one thing and one thing only, the nuclear reactor in Dimona. And Adenauer knew it. It has nothing to do, it has much to do, but not directly with Yeshuva Negev, the populating or the settlement of the Negev and so forth. These are two different things. Now I want to go back, with your permission, a few years back to understand the general background. I can already tell you that a loan was given. David Ben-Gurion told Adenauer that you have a moral obligation to the Jewish people, despite the fact that we have signed what they call the reparations deal, the Wiedergutmachung in German, as they call them, Schema Shilumim. He said, but you are responsible for destroying the 1/3 of the Jewish people that was capable of creating a Jewish state, and so on and so forth. And if we were only 3-4 million Jews in Israel, I would have never come to you to ask for help. But as it stands, you have to help us. And Adenauer accepts this argumentation. And it was a major decision that brought about what in Israel you are obliged to say, according to the foreign press, made Israel a nuclear, or gave Israel nuclear capability, and whatever developed afterwards. And Adenauer accepts it. But now let's go back to 1955, because I want to show you how geopolitical interests change so fast that it's unbelievable. When I approach Hebrew-speaking audience, am I talking too loud?
No.
If I do, show it to me, because my hearing is horrible. And I can't stand the hearing aids. They are killing me. I get headaches from them. So accept it with understanding. But if I speak too loud, signal me. Okay, let's continue.
It's not that.
Let's continue.
Excuse me. It's not that.
In 1955...
Somebody's phone is ringing and they've got it on silent instead of off. That's what making that noise. Please turn them off. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. But David, you have to take into account that these 2 minutes were taken from... you have limited me. בסדר, דוד, אני רק צוחק. אני רק צוחק. The year is 1955. The American president is Dwight Eisenhower. His Secretary of State is John Foster Dulles. Eisenhower is quite cold to the very idea of the Jewish state. He could have survived diplomatically very well without Israel. Israel is thrown in the eye or something like that. John Foster Dulles is openly anti-Semitic. Openly. So much so that there is the editor of Ma'ariv back then, Shalom Rosenfeld, Zichrono Livracha, when he came to his name, John Foster Dulles, he would write in Hebrew, Deutschland, Deutschland über Dulles, instead of Deutschland, Deutschland über alles, which is the German anthem. To that extent, in Britain, the Prime Minister is Anthony Eden. Already in Yalta, and then after the victory in Europe, the victory in Europe Day in Potsdam, he had shown himself to be viciously anti-Semitic. He would cover it with fine words, and the English language is rich enough to soften hard corners and so on and so forth, as you probably know much better than I do, because English, as you can hear, is not my mother tongue. But okay, you learn to live with it. His foreign minister, Secretary of State, is Sylvan Lloyd. Sylvan Lloyd, he himself, Anthony Eden was the Secretary of State when Churchill was the Prime Minister on his second term until 1955, and then he was replaced by Anthony Eden. And from reports inside the cabinet, you hear how they mock Churchill behind his back, calling him the old senile and this, that, and the other. You don't believe your eyes until you read it. And there is a very interesting book written by Anthony Eden's right hand, a guy named Evelyn Chuckberg. It's written like Evelyn, but I understand that you have to say Evelyn in those rare cases where Evelyn is not for a boy, but not for a girl, but for a boy. Evelyn Chuckberg, that's his name, and he wrote a book, Down to Suez, about the 1956 crisis, the Musketeer operation, we call it the Mivtza Sinai, and so on and so forth. And in it, you actually read everything. Everything is open, including anti-Semitic remarks, including very, very vicious remarks about Israel itself, and the fact that the Brits are not to be blamed for the Holocaust, and the Jews are always trying to put a mirror before our eyes as if we are responsible for the killing of 6 million Jews. No, surely they are not responsible. The only thing they did is close the doors of Palestine. That's all. And I'm not talking seriously, of course. Of course they are responsible, but that's not the way Evelyn Chuckberg looks at it. And so from his book, we know so much today about what happened there, and other sources. Anyway, now we are in 1955, and the great threat of both the United States and Western Europe is the Soviet Union. Stalin, Baruch Hashem, passed away 2 years earlier, and now you have Khrushchev and Bulgarin and others, but they are a grave danger to Western Europe, and what they are thriving for is entering the area through Istanbul, that was used to be Constantinople, through the Bosphorus, and then either they turn to the Gibraltar Straits so that the Atlantic is open to them, or to the Middle East, exactly what Putin is doing today. Exactly. You have to look at the map and understand. The map shows you exactly how things in history, at least in this part of the world, are reiterating themselves, the historical cycles. Anyway, the fear is that once the Russians enter through the Straits of the Bosphorus to northern Syria, Tartus, they enter Syria as they do today. They enter northern Iraq and then Kuwait, and they control the oil sources in the Middle East, which makes Western Europe in a very, very awkward position. Very awkward. And this is something they cannot afford, and the United States cannot afford to see its ally in NATO begging for a few drops of oil from Russia. What do? You ask Arab states to join NATO. The southern flank of NATO was then and still is today Turkey. Turkey is neighboring Syria, Syria neighboring Jordan neighboring Egypt. So you turn to them and say, join NATO. I'm making it very, very short as I can possibly make it. And they turn to Syria, which is under British influence at the time. Then they turn to Jordan. Jordan is ruled by a 16-year-old boy, King Hussein. He is scared of Nasser of Egypt to death. And he says to Sylvan Lloyd and John Foster Dulles, who asked him to join NATO, I'm willing to do it, but I want Nasser to join NATO as well, because he's afraid of it. So they turned to Nasser and said, you join Jordan that joins Syria, and now we have a fertile crescent, or croissant in French, to block the inevitable invasion of the Russians to the area. Nasser, as a good Arab leader, says, that's a good idea, I'm willing to wait and consider it, but I have a preliminary request to make. Before I give you an answer, what is your preliminary request? I want the Negev. Why do you want the Negev? Oh, because I want to have a terrestrial or a land pass from Egypt to Jordan. Israel is small. Israel controls today 28,000 square kilometers, which is the size of the Crimean Peninsula or the state of Armenia. Very, very small. Very small. Even smaller than the Netherlands, for instance, which is 40,000 square kilometers. But it is situated in a very strategic point. Americans used to say that the value of your house depends on location, and again location. And this is exactly the situation where Israel stands today once you look at the map. Because Israel is the door to the greatest Beit Meshugaim, the greatest madhouse in the world, the Middle East. And that's why our geopolitical situation today is so good. I hate to say it, because many Israelis are mad at me. Oh, you are on the far right, you are, I don't know, the right side of Genghis Khan or whatever, which is not the case. But as a matter of fact, factually, Israel now is in a very good position, because Israel is, I hope it continues, friendly with Putin. And in Tel Aviv and Haifa, officers of the Russian Navy and the Russian Air Force are going around. You don't recognize them because they are dressed in civil dress and not military. And the same goes for NATO, and the same goes for surely the Americans here. They pay for all the most of the military developments in Israel, and so on and so forth. So the geopolitical situation is pretty good. But as it stands, back then it was a different story altogether. And when you compare the geopolitical situation where Israel was 60 years ago to the situation today, you can realize what was the huge distance that was made by the Israelis to turn the country into the present situation. Anyway, the idea is that they very badly want Nasser to join NATO. And Nasser, in order to give a yes, says, I want the Negev. So John Foster Dulles and Sylvan Lloyd have no problem. They turn to the Israelis and say to them, give the Negev. The Prime Minister is not David Ben-Gurion. The Prime Minister back then is Moshe Sharet. David Ben-Gurion left the government on December 7th, 1953, in order to go to Sde Boker, study the Bible, and raise, raise cattle or raise sheep or whatever. Sounds good, in order to tell the younger generation, Leyashev Negev, very educational, very impressive. In addition to that, he wants to study the Bible. What can be nicer than that? But now, Moshe Sharet, who is much, much softer than David Ben-Gurion, and he can't take outside pressure too well, like David Ben-Gurion did, says to Sylvan Lloyd and John Foster Dulles, okay, I'm willing to bring it to the cabinet. Your demand, it's not a request, it's a demand. Namely that the state of Israel, the southern border would be in Kisfallujah, the War of Independence, which is today Kiryat Gat. Namely, that the state of Israel will be even smaller than what was appropriated to it by the UN on 29th of November 1947. To that extent. And he's willing to bring it to the cabinet, but he says, okay, to make sure that I can pass it in the cabinet, why don't you accept Israel as a partner to NATO? And the quick answer he gets is no, forget it. Israel can't be a member of NATO. To be a member of NATO means that if one of the members of NATO is attacked by an outside force, namely the Soviets, the communists, it means that, shall we say, an attack against Turkey or an attack against Italy, it's as if the United States was attacked. That's what a membership in NATO means. And they are not willing to guarantee Israel's existence. At the same time, they demand that Israel gives the Negev back. The chief of staff is Moshe Dayan. He's horrified. He takes the Piper cab, whatever, the light aircraft, and flies to Sde Boker, and informs David Ben-Gurion immediately about the demand and about Moshe Sharet stand, which is a very weak one. David Ben-Gurion is horrified as well. He leaves everything. He forgets about the Bible and about raising sheep and flies back to Tel Aviv, where he takes the Ministry of Defense from Pinchas Lavon, who had left the Ministry of Defense earlier because of the investigation of what we call in Hebrew ha'esek habish, that thing about the Israeli network in Cairo that was caught and on. I don't want to get into it because it is so complicated. But he was insulted, Pinchas Lavon, and left the Ministry of Defense, which now is taken by David Ben-Gurion. And his first answer to Anthony Eden, you won't get back even 1 square foot. Not even a grain of sand will be given to you. Forget about it. Anthony Eden is furious. He tells David Ben-Gurion, if you don't comply, we'll send the British Army to Israel to force you. For your interest, because they are always saving Israel from itself. How many houses did we have back then in Judea and Samaria? Not even a nail. Did it help us? Of course not. Give the Negev. David Ben-Gurion said, over my dead body. No. And then in the parliament, Anthony Eden hinted that the British army might hit Israel with all its might in order to enforce the decision that was taken by the Americans and by the British. Eisenhower won't send American troops to Israel to enforce the crazy plan. It was called the Alpha Project. When you come back home, get into the internet and type down Alpha Project 1955 and you'll see. I see that some of you are already doing that. Okay. Anyway, David Ben-Gurion said, if you send the British army to Israel, we'll fight the British army. Americans won't do the dirty job because in 1956, Eisenhower expected elections to continue to his second term. And there were already back then 6 million Jews in the United States, and they were mainly in the major cities. And since the election system in the United States goes by the Electoral College, their relative strength is much bigger. But he would let Anthony Eden do the dirty job, and Anthony Eden was willing to do it. David Ben-Gurion gambled. He had nerves of steel. And he estimated that Anthony Eden would not dare send the British army to Israel a mere decade after the Holocaust. Remember, it was 1955. Believe it or not, David Ben-Gurion was wrong. And now I want to present to you a top secret document that is no longer top secret. It goes way back to 2nd of August 1955. I'll explain everything and I'll read to you parts of the document. This is the only place where I lecture in English. I don't have to translate it. So it's amechaye, as we say. But it's a chilling document. Anthony Eden prepares the British army to attack Israel to force the Alpha Project. And then he turns to the British Army and Air Force, the Navy, I suppose, whatever is needed, to prepare the British Army for the war against Israel. What we have here is a document sent by Air Marshal Sir Claude Pelly, who is the commander of the British Royal Air Force, on August 1955, namely 7 years after the establishment of the sovereign state of Israel. and he sent this document, he sends it to London. Afterwards you are invited to photocopy it or whatever with you can do it with your phones, can't you?
Yeah.
Photograph it, whatever. I'll let you do it. He sends it to London, to the headquarters. And here is what he writes, among other things. The date is 2nd of August 1955. 55. Our first aim will be to destroy the Israeli Air Force, and we shall employ the whole of our available Air Force on this task until it is accomplished. This, we estimate, will take about 3 days. And thereafter, we will concentrate on direct and indirect support of ground forces. All air attacks will be made within the concept that the safety of the holy places must be absolutely safeguarded. Namely, that not even a shrapnel would hit, God forbid, the Holy Sepulchre, or the Christian or the churches along the Sea of Galilee, or whatever. But the damage to civilian property and loss of civilian life is unavoidable. One can go Mashiach unless something is wrong with my English. I don't know. We have also specifically excluded attacks against major oil refineries and storage installations such as those at Haifa. Why all of a sudden they are so dislargés? Why are they sparing the installations in Haifa? Because they mean to stay, and they need their oil to serve the British Navy and the British Air Force. That's why. And renew the flow of oil from northern Iraq, the famous H's, the 3 H's, H1, H2, and H3. H stands for Haifa, of course. David Ben-Gurion knew nothing about it. It was published a mere 6 years ago, that's all. The law of archives in Britain says that after 50 years or whatever, certain documents must be available to the public. And the Israeli Air Force publishes a bunch of documents concerning the development of the Israeli Air Force, and here you can find it. Here it is. Not only that, but they also give them, he adds to the document a list of targets in Israel and the coordinations given to the British pilots who would come from Cyprus. Cyprus was a British territory already from 1875 when it was purchased by Benjamin Disraeli, the British Prime Minister, and also from the Suez, that was still under the British control. It is frightening. We are not talking about what we call in Hebrew Tochnit Megera. Tochnit Megera is a drawer plan. Every army has drawer plans. One day, and I'm sure the Egyptian army has a drawer plan. How do you run a city such as Haifa? In the case we conquer or take Haifa or Tel Aviv. But, okay, draw plans. Everyone has every army, respective army, must have draw plans. We are talking about an ad hoc plan that was ordered on a very short term by Anthony Eden, the British Prime Minister. This is a different thing altogether. Now the $1 million question is, how come that the Negev is still ours? How come the airport, the British airport, has never showed itself here over our skies. What happened? This is the weirdness of history. This is the, we call it in Hebrew mishtanim, variables that makes you sometimes go meshige, because nothing develops linearly, nothing. And there are turns, wild turns all the time. 6 weeks later, we are talking about August the 2nd, 1955, right? 6 weeks later, Gamal Abdel Nasser published his agreement with the Soviet Union that is called the Czechoslovakian-Egyptian deal to sell modern arms to Egypt. Russia, the Kremlin would never sell arms. They are for peace. Only the Czechoslovakians would do it. What we call in modern Hebrew, alena, bunch of thieves and hypocrites, all of them. Of course it was ordered by the Kremlin that Czechoslovakia would sell Egypt MiG-15s, which was back then the most advanced aircraft in the world. Not even the Americans had a full answer to this aircraft. MiG-15s, Ilyushin 28, a bomber, a jet bomber. Israel had no answer against the Ilyushin. David Ben-Gurion would not sleep nights for fear that tomorrow they attack Tel Aviv and we can't defend Tel Aviv. 145 millimeter guns and so on and so forth. To that extent. And then Dwight Eisenhower became mad at Nasser. Privately he called him this son of a bitch, and even worse. Look, Eisenhower was a general. He was not the student of Hannah Bavli in Israel. There is a concept, Hannah Bavli, who teaches you how to behave politely and speak softly. He didn't speak softly, but he nevertheless carried a big stick, Eisenhower. And that was over. Because without the backing of the United States, Anthony Eden wouldn't dare to attack Israel for the Alpha Plan. And the Alpha Plan evaporated. Not only that, but a mere 15 months later, 15 months later, Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalizes the Suez Canal. And then the Suez Canal that was dug by the Egyptian people with their blood and sweat and everything else, and became a property, private property in the stock exchange of British and French. Now, Gamal Abdel Nasser wanted the Suez back. Why? Because he wanted to build the Sat El Ali, the higher dam on the Nile, to extend the agricultural area to raise more cattle and whatever. He needed food because the Egyptian population was expanding and growing very, very fast. So he turned to the World Bank. He wanted a loan. And Dwight Eisenhower said, you son of a bitch, you went to the communists to buy weapons, go to them, they'll build you the dam. Khrushchev, already the leader of the Soviet Union, said to Gamal Abdel Nasser, we know how to build dams, we are very good at it. But we are communists, we don't have money. So Gamal Abdel Nasser, sorry, nationalize the Suez Canal. The Brits and the French felt robbed. We say in Hebrew, "Akozak Nigzal," the thief that was himself robbed by another thief or whatever. And so they want the Suez Canal back, but they need an excuse. So they turn to David Ben-Gurion and say to David Ben-Gurion, "Join us. You'll send your paratroopers to the Mikle, which is very close to the Suez Canal. The distance from the Mikle to the Suez Canal is like the distance from Netanya to Rishon LeZion, not more than that." And then, based on the Kushta Convention of 1888, that says that the Suez Canal has to be open to all nations, we'll send paratroopers, French and British paratroopers, that would wait in Larnaca, in Cyprus, and land them on both entrances to the Suez Canal, Port Said and Port Suez. And then the canal would again be ours. David Ben-Gurion is no stupid. He knows exactly the tricks. He has very, very little appreciation for Great Britain and France. Zusammen. But he says, okay, we'll go along with it. Such a wise man, why would he do that? Risking the image of Israel, because Israel is only 8 years old, even less than that. And the third world is watching Israel without knowing Israel belongs to the first world, to the third world. What kind of a creature is Israel? But once they join Britain and France, it is very clear that Israel is a colonial state. And David Ben-Gurion realizes that. So why does he cooperate with them? When in June of 1950, Harry S. Truman, the American president, calls David Ben-Gurion and says the Security Council decided that we all fight in South Korea in order to save it from the communist aggression and so on and so forth. David Ben-Gurion says, oh, of course, we are with the Security Council. He hated the Security Council. The Security Council never wanted to deal with Israeli problems. When Israel went to the Security Council to complain that Nasser or Farouk before him, King Farouk, won't let Israeli ships cross the Suez Canal, the Security Council refused to deal with it. They never had enough room in the agenda, believe it or not. That was our situation. And then when Truman turned to him, he said, of course, we are with the Security Council. And he sent to Korea 2 ambulances that couldn't even function. That was the Israeli contribution to the war in Korea. So this wise man agrees to join Britain and France with their dirty war to gain back the Suez Canal that never belonged to them? Yes, that's what Ben-Gurion did, because he squeezed the French with the tacit or silent agreement of Britain that France would build a nuclear reactor for Israel in Dimona. And that, in David Ben-Gurion's opinion, would justify the diplomatic damages that would rain on Israel after joining the French and the Brits in what they call the Musketeer operation and what we called Mivtza Kadesh. To that extent. He was wise, David Ben-Gurion. And he got it. After the Sinai campaign itself was a diplomatic disaster. Anthony Eden had to resign. Guy Mollet, the French Prime Minister, resigned. Antoine Pinault, Maurice Charles, all the others. But Israel was left with the French promise, and the French fulfilled the promise and started building the nuclear reactor. You know why? No, not because they were so honest. The French were never honest. But because they were fighting in Algeria. And Gamal Abdel Nasser gave a safe haven to the leadership of the FLN in Algeria. So the French calculation was very simple. The enemy of my enemy is right now, temporarily, my friend. And so they started building the nuclear reactor. But then de Gaulle got in. And he first was nominated to be the prime minister. And then the French president said, I leave my seat to the greatest French of our time, de Gaulle, and he became the president of France. And when it became clear to him the full cooperation between France and Israel in the nuclear field, he became horrified. He called David Ben-Gurion to Sèvres and told him, you can't have the nuclear reactor, you have to dismantle it. And David Ben-Gurion answered him something that translates into Kushin Toches. I won't do it. And he got very mad and turned to Kennedy. And Kennedy was much softer, and he said, okay, he was the first American president to talk about special strategic relations with Israel, which is a weak substitute to Israel being a member of NATO. It's not being a member of NATO, but it's the second best alternative, something like that. And David Ben-Gurion refused to dismantle the nuclear reactor in Dimona. So much so that it was very clear that Israel won't be able to sustain the American pressure to dismantle the nuclear reactor, and it was Kennedy, the prime minister, the president. So David Ben-Gurion, on June 1963, resigned. Analysis about the fact that the Israeli Mossad was responsible for the assassination of Kennedy, which is of course nonsense, because Kennedy was adamant at stopping the development of the nuclear reactor. Now we are talking about 1963, and I want to get back to 1955. The genius of David Ben-Gurion was that in 1955 the French were still building the nuclear reactor in Dimona. But David Ben-Gurion realized full well that the minute de Gaulle would be the president, he would stop every cooperation with Israel and try to bring Israel to dismantle and destroy the nuclear reactor in Dimona. When he comes to New York to meet Adenauer, remember, it is the beginning of March. Already towards the end of January 1960, France exploded the first nuclear device in the Algerian Sahara. A bomb that was 4 times as powerful as the Hiroshima bomb. They dropped it from a plane. And I'm certain, I have no doubt about it, that as the scientific personnel was watching the explosion, among them were also Israeli scientists, because we were working together. And this is something to remember. The French did not give us a nuclear power, nuclear bombs. Israel's scientific power already in 1955 matched the French scientific power. We had physicists, world-great physicists, Israel Dostrovsky, Amos de Shalit, many others, really fine physicists. Even the father of the French bomb is a man called Henrik Goldschmidt. And he was half Jewish, and he was very friendly with David Ben-Gurion, who was scores of time here in Israel, and so on and so forth. So to make things clear, Israel was not a primitive state somewhere in Africa, where the French gave the Israelis who were climbing trees, the palm trees and so on and so forth, giving them the bomb, warning them not to drop the bomb on its head because it would explode and then they'll get a severe headache or whatever. I'm just laughing, of course. Israel scientifically matched easily the scientific power of France. In other words, that the project of when they started building the nuclear reactor, France did not have the bomb. It had it, like I said, only in January of 1960, and it was a project that the two states worked for it jointly. And the situation today is, let's face it, I mean, why do I say that the geopolitical situation of Israel has never been so good? Because now Egypt is friendly with Israel. Saudi Arabia opened an office of interests in Tel Aviv. Shh, we are not allowed to talk about it. According to foreign press, that is beseder, that is okay. Even Erdogan is friendly with us because we are friends with Putin. I agree to be friends with Putin. It's like embracing a crocodile, but what is the alternative? You have to realize that too. Jordan more or less exists because Israel is around, and Abdullah knows it more than anybody else. Syria, thank God, no longer exists. If there are people who believe that Syria is about to get back to the old borders, he doesn't know what he's talking about. This is not going to happen. The old Sykes-Picot borders of 100 years ago are not going to come to return. No way. So here is where Israel stands today. And the Saudi Arabian king and the Egyptian president are not friendly with Israel because they started to read the poems of Chaim Nachman Bialik. This is not the reason. The reason is Israel's nuclear capability, that is the only force in the Middle East that can stand against Iran. And Iran is very, very scary. And when, for instance, Benjamin Netanyahu met Donald Trump a fortnight ago, when was it? Something like that, and warned him about the deal that Obama had made with Iran and the danger that Iran presented to the whole of the Middle East, he had behind him the Saudi Arabian king, the Jordanian king, and the Egyptian president. Maybe even Erdogan. All are fearful of Iran and its nuclear dream. Thank God they don't have it, and no one knows how long will it take them to have it, and I don't see Donald Trump staying idle and let Iran or Israel develop it comfortably. This is the situation where we stand today. And the meeting between Adenauer and David Ben-Gurion was thus a very, very crucial meeting, because David Ben-Gurion actually comes to Adenauer, who knows everything, because the German intelligence is the best in Europe, already then, still today, the best in Europe. They know how to work methodically, the Germans. Adenauer knows everything about the nuclear plan of Israel, and he helps Israel because he believes, he says, he agrees with David Ben-Gurion and said, nuclear power in the hands of Israel is not a war device, it's a peace device. Because this would guarantee the continuation in Israel, because Arab states would realize once Israel is going nuclear, that the dream of wiping out Israel of the face of the earth is not even a dream. It's not an option anymore. They'll have to accept the existence of Israel, not because they learn to love Israel. They'll never learn to love Israel, or the Jews that live here, but they'll learn to accept Israel, which is a major breakthrough. As for the Palestinian leadership, the clock, as we see, is working against them. And I'm a great optimist, and I believe, maybe not in our lifetime, but sometime in the future, maybe in 50 years, maybe in 60 years, the Palestinians would have to recognize the existence of Israel, as Egypt does today, and Saudi Arabia does today, and Jordan and Turkey, and so on and so forth. And David Ben-Gurion was a Navi, was a prophet, no question about it. Even though he never agreed to accept himself as a Navi. One last remark. I still have time, David? Yes, still have time. One last remark. David Ben-Gurion constantly had to fight two theaters, an inner theater and an external theater. During the War of Independence, he had bitter arguments with the upper echelon of the Haganah that turned into Tzahal, into the Israeli army. And as it turns out, this guy who never visited the military school was much wiser than our best generals during the War of Independence. For instance, there was a very bitter argument in June of 1948 and May, June of 1948, where the situation was horrible, horrible. Few people believed, that no one believed that Israel would be able to sustain an attack by regular Arab armies, the Egyptian army, the Jordanian army, the Syrian, the Lebanese, the Iraqi, and so on and so forth. Chief among them was George Marshall, who was the chief of staff of the American army during World War II. The man knew a thing or two about reading military maps, you have to admit. And he told Truman they won't be able to sustain those attacks. Therefore, I object to the American decision, to your decision to to support the partition plan of the UN. Because once the Haganah is attacked by those armies, they won't be able to fight back. And in no time, the Arab armies would conquer Israel, and then they will start to eliminate systematically the Jewish community in Palestine, which back then, or Israel, the young Israel, which back then numbered 670,000. And then the American Jews would start yelling and crying, save them, and we would have to send American soldiers to stop the carnage in Palestine. And I don't want to send American soldiers 2 years after the end of World War II. There's nothing anti-Semitic about it. He was the Secretary of State of the United States, not Israel. You have to admit. But he was wrong. He was wrong. And we were victorious. But David Ben-Gurion knew full well that that was only the beginning. That the Arab countries won't give up until they succeed. They can fail 10 times. They need to succeed only once to obliterate the state of Israel and kill its people. They didn't have to worry about resolutions in the Security Council because they control the UN as they do today. That's it. And forget about more. But once Israel had nuclear might, they won't dare to start with Israel. Because then Israel will say, look, I'm not saying I have a nuclear shalayla. I don't say I don't. All I'm saying is don't mess with me. Because even if you succeed in killing me, I'll force you to pay a price you won't be able to stand or to pay. And Adenauer accepted his stand. That nuclear device or nuclear capability in the hands of Israel is a capability for peace, not for war. All the way to the submarines. The Dolphin submarines. The Dolphin submarine is not a submarine to send a torpedo that goes for, $3 million to sink a Palestinian boat that leaves the Gaza port and then costs something like $200. Not for that. The Dolphin submarines are equipped, when they come to Israel, they are equipped with cruise missiles that are built in Israel, and there's 16 of them. According to the Spiegel, everything is a foreign press. You have to know, I'm a law-abiding citizen. And each of the torpedoes, or the missiles, the cruise missiles, that have a range of around 2,000 kilometers, has a nuclear and thermonuclear warhead. Which means that even if Iran tomorrow somehow manages to develop nuclear warheads and miniaturize them on missile heads, they have to think twice and 3 times and maybe 30 times before they decide to attack Israel. Because they can attack Israel, and Israel is a very tempting target because it is so small. Well, by the way, if they kill the population of Israel, they, by the way, kill also 20% of the population is Arab. But the Israeli Arabs are all Sunni. So it's a price worth paying from their point of view, I suppose. But what would they do with the submarines that are submerged either in the Mediterranean or the Red Sea or the Persian Gulf, and they have the missiles can reach each and every point in Iran. And as my good friend Professor Shlomo Aronson uses to say, at which point Israel would obliterate Iran, so much so that in Iran won't be left, lo yishaer beIran mashtin bakir, as it is written in the Bible with King David, when he is very furious with the guys that are not welcomed by Navala Israeli, וכן הלאה. And so he said until the morning, this guy won't have even one man that can stand and piss on a wall. Mashtin bakir. And that's the same thing here. And they are not stupid. And they know full well that they cannot mess with Israel. And the Egyptians and the Saudis and the Jordanians know it as well. So they are friendly with us. Not because of any moral standing, but because we are powerful. And this is geopolitics, and this is the reality. And as the French used to say, diplomacy, and all the rest of it is a French word that I don't wish to translate. Merde in silk socks or something like that. Okay, fine. What difference does it make? We have to exist. And we are doing it pretty well, I believe. Questions? David, you don't mind if people ask a question or two? As I said, my hearing is horrible.
I wanted to ask you, first the French were helping build the mine in Nepal.
Dus,
Then you said Adenauer was helping. Was it in addition to or instead of?
Okay. The Germans
Can
were
we do the
Adenauer.
microphone? Can one go back?
Please repeat the question. Would you like?
Were Adenauer helping Israel in addition to the building of the nuclear reactor by the French, or instead? The question is both. David Ben-Gurion realized as he met Adenauer that French is about to abandon Israel because de Gaulle was completing the negotiations about the withdrawal of the French settlers, the Pieds Noirs, in Algeria. Once it was over, he no longer needed Israel. Since de Gaulle was a very, very small lover of Israel and Jews, he couldn't care less. David Ben-Gurion realized it full well as they were fighting, as de Gaulle was negotiating in Geneva with the leadership of the FLN about the French colonies leaving Algeria, or giving at least the Algerian authorities independence or whatever. I don't want to get into it because it was quite complicated. But David Ben-Gurion realized that once de Gaulle did not need Israel to threaten Gamal Abdel Nasser, for instance, he would abandon us. So ahead of the abandonment of the French, he went to New York to see Adenauer. And he said to Adenauer, you have a moral obligation to help us. They were talking about the atomic contribution of Germany to Israel. Der Spiegel had a series of articles about it, including documents that they were showing in their articles. Strauss, who was the defense minister of Germany, was approached by Shimon Peres and others, and they helped us. There was to make things even more embarrassing, there was a guy, a German guy, who was an important man, instrumental in the Mishpatei Nuremberg, or Chukei Nuremberg, the Nuremberg laws in 1935.
Wow.
And then he became Adenauer's chief intelligence head. And then during the Eichmann trial, he was ordered by Servatius, the lawyer of Eichmann, to come to Israel to testify why Eichmann is about to stand trial. And his name was Hans Globke, was the head of the intelligence of the German intelligence of West Germany, where during the Nazi era, Hans Globke was much, much more important than Eichmann. Of course, Hans Globke would never come to Israel, because the minute he would set the foot in Israel, the Israeli police would have to arrest him. But Adenauer asked Ben-Gurion that he would not be invited to Jerusalem, and his name was erased. Don't ask how. And he was the guy who organized all the flow of money, German money, to Israel to continue with the nuclear program. He was the one who organized the money to build the equipment that was needed to be used in the Weizmann Institute for the major experiments. that brought about the atomic bomb, finally, the Israeli atomic bomb, and so on and so forth. Very strange world. Very strange. But basically, David Ben-Gurion was a real prophet. Although, like I said before, he never recognized himself as a prophet. But he realized what was going to happen. That was his genius. That's why he went to Adenauer. And Adenauer himself was a very, very wise man. And he accepted David Ben-Gurion's argument that Germany had a commitment to see to it that Israel continues to exist. And Adenauer himself said so to David Ben-Gurion during the negotiations. We'll never leave you alone, he said. Never leave you alone. Remember, Adenauer himself was a victim of the Nazi era. These are facts taken from I don't know, I don't know, imaginary science fiction or whatever, but those were facts, and they saved Israel. Okay. Please, only raise your voice, please. So that others.
Yeah, and then can you go back to the microphone?
Thank you for a great presentation. I'd like you to comment on
Take it and do it. David, don't insult people. Take it to him.
Can only take
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I'd like you to comment a little bit on the discussions and readings that I've read. Shimon Peres discussing the bomb originally with Ben-Gurion, and it's alleged that Peres said to him at one point, there will be somebody one day who will want to destroy us. We should seriously consider a defensive mechanism like building a bomb. Can you discuss Shimon Peres' role in the bomb?
Okay, I'll try to answer. Shimon Peres is not the father of the Israeli bomb. He was very instrumental in helping David Ben-Gurion when he was in the political desert, and I'll explain. The father of the Israeli bomb is considered to be a guy whose name is David. The name escapes my memory. I'll bring it to you in a minute. Anyway, Peres was not the father of the Israeli bomb. The problem was that when David Ben-Gurion, and I talked about David Ben-Gurion's impossible situation where he had two theaters, an inner theater and an external theater during the War of Independence, and then as he thrived to bring Israel to the threshold of nuclear capability. There was in Israel, there was a committee that was called Avad לפירוז המזרח התיכון מנשק גרעיני, namely the committee to neutralize the Middle East from nuclear power. And it was headed by Martin Buber. It was headed by Yeshayahu Leibovich. Yeshayahu Leibovich considered himself to be a prophet, not David Ben-Gurion. And he, whenever he would be interviewed on TV and would be asked what is the most hated thing for him, he said, he used to say, tipshutam shel habriot, the foolishness of people. And the word tipshutam, he would literally spit, tipshutam shel habriot. He was very furious. He considered himself to be so wise above everybody else. And so David Ben-Gurion's argument was that unlike regular arms, nuclear bomb demands scientific background. And no country in the Middle East has a scientific background that can justify the development of a nuclear bomb, except for Israel, of course. And it was not acceptable to the committee of the פירוז המזרח התיכון מנשק גרעיני, Avad. And they turned him meshige. They tortured him like you wouldn't believe. And all along the political spectrum, except for the right wing, Menachem Begin and others, people from Achdut Avoda, from Mapa, Yigal Alon, Israel Galili, you name them, objected to the efforts of Israel to develop a nuclear device. They argued that the world won't let us do it. So once we reach the nuclear threshold, they would destroy everything. And all the efforts and all the billions of dollars that needed to develop a nuclear bomb would go down the drain. That was their argument. As it turned out, David Ben-Gurion was right. Because as the Americans say, nothing succeeds like success. And maybe it was a miracle. Maybe it was a miracle that Kennedy was assassinated. I hate to say, because he was replaced by Johnson. And Johnson helped Israel reach the threshold and become a nuclear force. And today we know why. Until a few years ago it was unclear why he was so friendly to Levi Eshkol. And then said to Israel, you don't have to sign the non-proliferation treaty. You don't have to do it. Today we know why. Through his mother he was Jewish.
Wow.
Yes. Yes, his mother, his grandmother was a German Jew from Germany, and you know that if it goes through the females, the mitochondria, and then so happened that they had females in the continuing generations, about maybe 3, maybe even 4 generations or whatever. And he was a Presbyterian, and he would go to church and everything else. But he realized, he knew full well he was Jewish. He had Jewish blood in his veins. That he knew. And he was very proud of it. And when he was a young congressman during World War II, he did every effort he could to save Jews and bring them to the United States. And he swore to close friends that if he came to a position where he could decide in the United States something, he won't let Israel be abandoned. Won't. And so he became the President of the United States, and he was the one. Levi Eshkol was the first Prime Minister that met an American president in the White House. David Ben-Gurion met Kennedy at the Wall of Astoria, at the איך אומרים, הכניסה האחורית. The exit that is behind. Supposedly, he was standing there, and Kennedy, the security people won't let him leave out of Astoria through the main door because of security reasons, so he went to the back door. Okay, back door. And there David Ben-Gurion met him. It was very humiliating for Israel. And Levi Eshkol was the first prime minister to be welcomed in the White House itself by Johnson. And Johnson protected Israel. There is a very interesting book that was written by Avner Cohen. He wrote it in English, and then he himself translated it into Hebrew. It is called Israel v'Apsasa, Israel and the Bomb. I believe you can find it here in Netanya, in the public library or whatever. Read it and see. Read it and see. So Israel indeed lived from a miracle to a miracle, but this is no longer the case. And that's the reason why I argue that the geopolitical situation in Israel has never been so good. On a comparative basis, of course.
You know, Konrad Adenauer, Konrad Adenauer, was he always pro-Jewish?
Was he?
Always pro-Jewish?
No, Konrad Adenauer wasn't Jewish.
No, was he pro-Jewish? Was he pro-Jewish?
He was pro-Jewish. He himself, during the Nazi era, was a victim. He fled to Sweden and so on and so forth. He spent time in a concentration camp. Yes. One last question. Okay.
As I understand it,
Hold on. Take it.
I repeat it anyways.
I don't need this. My question is,
No, you did.
I'll repeat his question.
my question,
I pulled it out, so it's not going to help.
Now, you can talk now. Hold it close to your mouth.
No, he's trying to
connected,
get out.
David?
It's not connected.
So there's no point in talking to it. Is it connected?
No, try.
I understand basically the French contribution to Israel's nuclear capability. Could you amplify a little bit about the technology to make the particular bombs that Israel has today, which of course they deny? Where did they get that from? Also the French?
Okay. About the technology, I'm not a physicist, and nor am I an engineer. But the basics of producing a nuclear bomb is no secret, and you can read it quite openly and clearly in the internet and so on and so forth. Basically, there are two types of nuclear explosion. One is enriched uranium, where you, by using simple explosives, you bring about what they call the sustained chain reaction. And this was the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima on June 6, 1948. The scientists were so certain it would work, they didn't even test it before. And it worked. The other explosion is called plutonium. Plutonium was another explosive that is a derivative of enriched uranium and was discovered by the Americans where they developed the bomb by a team of American physicists headed by a Jewish Italian physicist. We'll get to it. And so this is what you have in plutonium that you don't have in uranium is the fact that you need much less material. You don't really need more than back then 7-8 kilograms. That's all. That's all. Today they use even less than that to bring a sustained chain reaction, which means a nuclear explosion. The name of the Italian physicist is Emilio Segre. He was an Italian Jew. Now, according to foreign sources, the nuclear reactor in Dimona produces plutonium, which is much more efficient. The difference between plutonium and uranium is that plutonium you cannot bring into a sustained chain reaction until you employ a technology that is called implosion instead of explosion, implosion. For that, you need very, very accurate and sensitive detonators that are covering the sphere, the ball, and then exploding it very accurate. The pass of time between detonator and detonator is by the millionth of a second, to that extent. Around 25 years ago, there was a big scandal that involved Milchan. Milchan, the friend of Bibi Netanyahu, that supposedly supplied him with endless quantity of cigars and champagne. I wonder when, according to the Israeli press, he never had time to sleep because he had to smoke so many cigars. And by the way, Fidel Castro, a year before he died, he said, Fidel Castro, the famous Cuban rebel with a cigar said, if you have a guy you hate really bad, give him a gift, a box of cigars. That was Fidel Castro. Anyway, בואו נחזור לעניין שלנו. Milchen bought from an American manufacturer, though very detonators, very sensitive and accurate detonators. The Pentagon was furious and it demanded the detonators back. And Israel returned the detonators to the manufacturer. And sanctions were made against Milchen and so on and so forth. But as the Time magazine wrote, the Israeli engineers learned pretty well how to use the detonators. And the detonators you use only for one purpose, to bring a sustained chain reaction on a sphere of plutonium explosive. Now, like in algebra, you don't have to say that 2 plus 2 gives you 4. It's enough to say 2 plus x equals 4. What is the x? And so on and so forth. This is the situation. Israel's capability is proven. You don't need to experiment with detonating nuclear warheads. There are other methods today. And besides, I don't advise any country to try to see whether the Israeli bombs work or not. Baruch Hashem, nekaveh שיפחדו מאיתנו גם ככה. That's what I can say about it. I hope I answered part of your question at least. תודה רבה, חברים וחברות.
Ladies and gentlemen, your claps already have answered what I'm going to ask you to do, which is to give a really big thank you to a tour de force which we heard this evening from Yitzchak. Before I go any further, it is always the thing that we do here. When we have a lecturer, we make a presentation to the lecturer so that he will remember the time that he came to McDonald's. Now, in this particular case, the presentation is something different because Yitzchak was here about 2 years ago. So what we have here is a pictorial of the work that Jacques did to advertise this particular lecture, and I will read it as follows. This illustration is presented by the new Synagogue of Netanya, McDonald's, with grateful thanks to Dr. Yitzchak Noy in appreciation for his lecture on March the 18th, 2017, Kuf Aleph Ba'adar Tufshin Ayin Zayin. The illustration refers to his lecture, The Waldorf Astoria Meeting Securing the Future of the Jewish State. Thank you, Yitzchak. Now, when the photographs are finished, I'd just like to speak to you about some forthcoming events that we have at McDonald's.
First of all, I want to thank you so much for an amazing talk, incredible. The document that you had, the top secret document,
yes.
Where does it come from? Where did you obtain it?
It was released by the Brits. I mean, after 50 years, there is Chok Archeonim, what they call it. And so it was collected by the editors of this book. No, it's not mine. It's not mine.
Thank you so much. A big yeshua. It was the most incredible talk. Thank you.
That's the truth. I can't go
Oh, this is what she thought.